The moment the first handful of dirt hit my wife Catherine's coffin, I felt my phone vibrate against my chest. I ignored it. I was 78 years old, standing in the freezing rain of a Chicago November, saying goodbye to the only woman I had ever loved. But the phone buzzed again, and again. A persistent, long vibration that demanded attention. With a trembling hand, I pulled it out. It was a number I did not recognize, but I answered it instinctively, perhaps hoping for a distraction from the hollow ache in my heart. Henry listened to me carefully. Do not react. Do not turn around. The voice was old, raspy, but commanding. I recognized it immediately. It was Preston Sterling, the billionaire owner of the investment firm, where my wife had worked as an administrative assistant for 40 years. Preston, I whispered, confused. I am at the funeral. I know where you are, Henry. I am watching from the tree line. Listen to me. Do not look behind you right now. Your son Jason and his wife Brittany are standing directly behind you. And Henry, they are not crying. Jason is checking his watch, and Brittany is fixing her lipstick. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind shot down my spine. They are waiting for this to be over, Henry. They are waiting to pick the carcass clean. Get in your car, lose them, come to my office immediately. Catherine left something behind, and if those vultures find out about it before you do, your life is in danger. The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Slowly, against Preston's advice, I turned my head just an inch. Through the mist of the rain, I saw them. My son Jason, 48 years old, was tapping his foot impatiently, scrolling through something on his phone with a bored expression. Brittany, my daughter-in-law, was using the reflection of her compact mirror to check her teeth. They weren't mourning. They were waiting. If you have ever felt the sting of betrayal from your own flesh and blood, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what city you are watching from, and if you have ever had to protect yourself from your own family. The ride back to my house was the longest 40 minutes of my life. Jason insisted on driving me in the black luxury SUV he had rented for the week. He always did that. He was a real estate broker who hadn't closed a significant deal in 3 years, yet he always needed to look the part. He wore a $3,000 suit, while I knew for a fact his credit cards were maxed out. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the gray highway, clutching Catherine's old prayer book. The silence in the car wasn't respectful. It was heavy, loaded with things unsaid. Brittany was in the back seat. I could see her in the rearview mirror. The blue light of her smartphone illuminated her face. She wasn't looking at old photos of Catherine. She wasn't texting condolences to family. I squinted, looking closer at the reflection in her glasses. It was a map app. Zillow. She was looking at property values in my neighborhood. So, Dad. Jason started, his voice too loud in the quiet car. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't talk about how beautiful the service was. He cleared his throat. You know, Mom wouldn't want us to be sad. She was practical. She would want us to focus on the future, on the practicalities. I tightened my grip on the prayer book. What practicalities are those, Jason? Well, you know. Expenses. The funeral cost a fortune. I mean, did we really need that mahogany casket? Pine would have been fin. It's just going into the ground, right? My wife deserved the best, I said, my voice low. Sure, Jason said, waving a hand dismissively. But money is tight, Dad. The market is tough right now, and you're on a fixed income. We need to be smart. We need to think about assets. Assets. My wife had been in the ground for less than an hour, and he was already using words like assets. I looked at him, really looked at him. At 48, Jason had the desperate look of a man who was running out of time. His hairline was receding, and there was a frantic energy in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. He wasn't grieving his mother. He was calculating her worth. We pulled into the driveway of the house Catherine and I had bought 30 years ago. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a solid 4-bedroom home in a neighborhood that had appreciated significantly in value. I had paid off the mortgage a decade ago. It was my sanctuary. But as I stepped out of the car and looked at the front porch where Catherine used to grow her hydrangeas, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a target. "Let's go inside, Dad," Brittany said, her voice sugary sweet, but her eyes cold as ice. "We made some coffee. We need to sit down and have a family meeting." I didn't want a family meeting. I wanted to lie down in my bed and smell Catherine's perfume on the pillow. But I walked inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked toward my favorite armchair in the living room, but Jason was already there, spreading out a stack of papers on the coffee table. He didn't even give me time to take off my coat. "Sit down, Dad," Jason said. He wasn't asking. He was commanding. I sat on the edge of the sofa. "What is this, Jason? This, Dad, is the solution to all our problems." Jason tapped the paper with his index finger. "Look, let's be real. You are 78. Your health isn't what it used to be. Mom was the one who handled everything right. The cooking, the cleaning, the bills. You can't live in this big house alone. It's dangerous. You could fall. You could leave the stove on. You're forgetting things, Dad." "I've noticed it." I haven't forgotten anything I said, my voice steady. "I fixed the transmission on my truck last week. My mind is fine." "Denial is the first stage," Brittany chimed in, walking over to stand behind Jason, her hands on his shoulders. "A united front." "We are just worried about you, Henry. We found this amazing facility. It's a senior living community. VIP level. They have activities, nurses, everything you need." I looked at the brochure on the table. It looked like a hospital with better wallpaper. And it cost $6,000 a month. "I am not going to a home," I said. "I am staying here, in my house." Jason slammed his hand on the table. The coffee cups rattled. "It's not just about you, Dad, Top. Stop being so selfish for once in your life, selfish." I looked at my son. I had worked double shifts at the auto shop for 20 years to put him through private school. I had bailed him out of 3 failed business ventures. I had paid for his wedding to Brittany, and I was the selfish one. "I owe money, Dad." Jason said, his voice dropping to a hiss. "A lot of money." How much I asked, though, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. $500,000. The air left the room. 500,000, $500,000. What did you do, Jason? It was an investment. A startup. It was supposed to be a sure thing. But the partners, they vanished. And the people I borrowed the money from, Dad, they aren't banks. They don't send letters. They break legs. He looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. But it wasn't the terror of a child seeking comfort. It was the terror of a cornered animal. "They gave me until the end of the week, Dad. If I don't pay, they are going to kill me. Do you understand? They will kill your son." I looked at Brittany. She wasn't shocked. She knew. This was the plan all along. Wait for Catherine to die, then pressure the old man. "So your solution is to sell my house?" I asked. "It's the only asset we have," Jason shouted. "The house is worth $800,000 in this market. We sell it, pay off my debt, and use the rest to put you in the home. It's perfect. You get care, I stay alive. Everyone wins." "Except me," I said quietly. "I lose my home. I lose my memories." "You are losing your mind anyway." Jason stood up, grabbing a glass vase from the side table, a vase Catherine had loved, and hurling it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Sign the power of attorney, Dad. Sign it now." "I am not asking. I am telling you. You are going to sign this paper. We are going to list the house tomorrow, and you are going to thank me for saving your life, because if I go down, I am dragging you down with me." I looked at the shattered glass on the floor. I looked at the man I had raised, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man who was now threatening me in my own living room, while his mother's body was barely cold in the ground. Preston Sterling was right. These weren't my children anymore. They were vultures. And I realized with a terrifying clarity that if I didn't sign that paper, Jason wasn't just going to let it go. He was desperate enough to do something unthinkable. "I need a glass of water," I said, my voice trembling, feigning a weakness I didn't feel. "My heart, it's beating too fast. Let me take my pill. Then we can sign." Jason exhaled, his shoulders dropping. He thought he had won. He thought I was just a scared, frail old man. Good. Let him think that. "Get him some water," Brittany, Jason ordered. As she walked to the kitchen, I knew I had maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes to make a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to sign. I was going to war. But first I had to find out what Preston Sterling knew. I had to see what my wife had left behind that was worth killing for. I managed to get them out of the house that night by playing the part of the exhausted, grieving widower perfectly. I pretended to swallow the pill Jason forced on me, but I slipped it under my tongue and spat it into the sink the moment the bathroom door clicked shut. I told them I needed to sleep, that I would sign the papers in the morning when my head was clearer. Jason hesitated, his eyes darting to the grandfather clock in the hall, calculating his deadline with the loan sharks. But Brittany pulled his arm and whispered that a rested mind was easier to manipulate. They left, but not before Jason checked the window latches as if I were a flight risk or a prisoner. When the headlights of his rented SUV finally disappeared down the street, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, clutching the handle of my old baseball bat, listening to the house settle, waiting for a dawn I wasn't sure I wanted to see. The sound that woke me wasn't birdsong or the gentle hum of the refrigerator. It was the screech of metal on metal, the high-pitched whine of a power drill tearing through wood. I jerked awake in my armchair, my neck stiff, confusion clouding my mind for a second, before the reality of the previous day crashed back down on me. I scrambled to the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door was open. Jason was there, kneeling, drilling into the doorframe. He was installing a deadbolt, a heavy-duty double-cylinder deadbolt that required a key from both sides. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. Jason didn't even look up. He blew sawdust off the new lock and continued tightening the screws. "We are moving in, Dad." "I told you. You can't be alone. It is irresponsible of us to leave you here by yourself in this condition." I looked past him to the driveway. The SUV was back trunk open, piled high with suitcases and boxes. Brittany was marching up the walkway carrying 2 large black trash bags. She wasn't bringing things in. She was preparing to take things out. "This is my house, Jason," I said, trying to summon the authority I used to have when he was a boy. "You cannot just move in here without my permission. Get out." Jason finally stood up. He wiped his hands on his designer jeans and looked at me with a pitying expression that made my stomach turn. "It is not a request, Dad. It is a necessity. Brittany and I gave up our apartment this morning. We have nowhere else to go. We are doing this for you." He stepped inside, forcing me to back up. The invasion was complete. They weren't just guests. They were occupiers. And I realized with a sinking feeling that the urgency wasn't just about selling the house. They needed a place to hide. They needed a fortress against whatever debt collectors were hunting my son. I turned to see Brittany in the hallway. She dropped the black trash bags and headed straight for the hall closet, the one where Catherine kept her coats, her scarves, the little collection of hats she wore to church on Sundays. "We need to make space," Brittany announced, her voice flat and businesslike. "If we are staying here, we can't have this place looking like a mausoleum. It is depressing." She yanked the door open and started pulling Catherine's beige trench coat off the hanger. It was the coat she had worn to the grocery store the day she collapsed. It still smelled like her, like vanilla and rain. "Don't touch that," I shouted, moving faster than I had in years. Brittany ignored me. She stuffed the coat into the black plastic bag. Then came the blue wool scarf I had bought her for our 40th anniversary. Then the rain boots. "It is just old rags, Henry," she said, not even calling me Dad anymore. "No one wears this stuff. It smells like old people. We are doing you a favor decluttering. You need a fresh start. She reached for a ceramic vase on the entry table, a hideous, lumpy thing Jason had made in third-grade art class that Catherine had cherished more than any expensive crystal. Brittany looked at it with disgust and tossed it into the bag. I heard it crack. That sound snapped something inside me. I lunged at her. I didn't think. I just wanted her hands off my wife's memory. I grabbed the bag, trying to wrestle it from her grip. "Give it to me!" I roared. Brittany shrieked, letting go of the bag suddenly. The momentum threw me off balance. My foot caught on the edge of the rug, the same rug Catherine had always told me to tape down. I went down hard. My hip hit the floorboards with a sickening thud, and the wind was knocked out of me. Pain radiated up my side, sharp and blinding. I lay there gasping, staring at the ceiling, feeling humiliation burn hotter than the pain in my hip. Dad Jason rushed over, but he didn't help me up immediately. He stood over me for a second, looking down. I saw a flash of satisfaction in his eyes, a cold calculation. He wanted me to be frail. He needed me to be broken. He knelt down and gripped my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. He pulled me up, not gently, but with a force that felt like a warning. He leaned close to my ear, his breath smelling of stale coffee and fear. "See, Dad," he whispered. "Look at you. You can't even stand up on your own. You are weak. You are confused. You are a danger to yourself. Stop fighting us. If you just do what we say, no one gets hurt." He steered me toward the living room sofa and pushed me down onto it. Brittany was already back at the closet, sweeping the rest of Catherine's things into the bag with renewed vigor, as if punishing the objects for my resistance. Jason stood in front of me, blocking my view of her, blocking my path to the door. "You stay here, Dad. Rest. You had a bad fall. We don't want to have to call the doctor and tell him you are having another episode, do we?" He was building the narrative. He was laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent. I looked at the new deadbolt on the door. I looked at my son, whose hands were shaking slightly as he adjusted his cuffs. I sat back, letting my shoulders slump, letting my face go slack. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to think I was the broken old man they saw on the floor. "Okay," I whispered, staring at my hands. "Okay, Jason. You are right. I am. I am tired." "Good." Jason exhaled, the tension in his shoulders dropping. "That is good, Dad. Just relax. We will take care of everything." He walked into the kitchen, pulling his phone out of his pocket. I watched him through the reflection in the hallway mirror. He wasn't calling a mover. He was hunched over the counter, his voice low and frantic. "I am handling it," he hissed into the phone. "I have the asset. I just need a few days to liquidate." Yeah, he is cooperating. Just don't come here." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. He wasn't just in debt. He was in deep with people who didn't care about laws or lives. And now those people knew where I lived. I was a prisoner in my own home, guarded by a son who was more terrified of his creditors than he was of losing his father. The house felt smaller, the walls closing in. But as I sat there listening to Brittany carelessly tossing 40 years of my life into garbage bags, my mind cleared. The grief was still there at a heavy stone in my chest, but the fog of shock was gone. I needed to get out. I needed to get to Preston Sterling. He knew something. He had warned me. And if my wife, my sweet, quiet Catherine, had left something behind that could save me, I had to find it. I looked at the back door visible through the kitchen archway. Jason was distracted. Brittany was upstairs now, rummaging through the bedroom. I checked my pocket. I still had the spare key to the old sedan Catherine used to drive the one parked in the garage that Jason deemed too worthless to sell immediately. I had maybe a 5-minute window before one of them came back to check on me. I gripped the armrest of the sofa, ignoring the screaming pain in my hip. I wasn't weak, I was a mechanic. I knew how to fix broken things. And right now, my life was broken. It was time to fix it. I realized as I tried to put weight on my injured hip that I wasn't going to make it to the garage. The pain was blinding, a white-hot spike that stole my breath. And even if I managed to limp to the car, the noise of the automatic garage door would alert Jason before I could even turn the ignition. I sank back onto the sofa, my mind racing. Physical force wasn't an option against a man 20 years my junior, especially not when I was battered and bruised. I had to use the one thing they thought I had lost: my mind. I let out a low groan, gradually increasing the volume until it became a wheezing gasp. I clutched my chest, scrunching my shirt fabric in my fist. Jason, who was in the kitchen whispering frantically into his phone, stopped mid-sentence. He peered around the corner, his face a mask of annoyance that quickly shifted to calculation. "Dad." "What is it now?" he asked, walking over but keeping his distance as if my pain were contagious. My chest, I rasped, squeezing my eyes shut. "It feels heavy. My arm is tingling. I think the fall. Maybe it triggered something. I need my doctor. I need Dr. Evans." Jason looked at the door, then at me. He was doing the math. If I died right there on the rug, the house would go into probate. It would take months, maybe a year, to settle the estate. He didn't have a year. He didn't have a week. He needed me alive and legally competent to sign those papers. "Fine," he snapped, grabbing his keys from the counter. "Get up. I am taking you to the ER." "No ER," I wheezed, playing the stubborn old man card. "They will keep me for days. Just drop me at Dr. Evans's clinic near the hospital. He knows my history. He can give me something to stabilize it. I just need to settle my heart." Jason hesitated, but the logic worked for him. A quick clinic visit was better than a hospital admission. He hauled me up, less gentle than before, and half-dragged me to his SUV. Brittany didn't even look up from the trash bags as we left. The drive was silent and tense. Jason drove aggressively, weaving through traffic, his leg bouncing nervously whenever we hit a red light. When we pulled up to the curb of the medical center, he didn't put the car in park. "I have to meet someone," he said, avoiding my gaze. Probably the people he owed money to. "Go in, get your pills, and sit in the waiting room. I will be back in an hour. Don't go anywhere." I nodded, clutching my chest for effect as I climbed out. I watched him speed away, the taillights of the SUV disappearing into the city traffic. The moment he was gone, I straightened my back. The pain in my hip was still there, sharp and throbbing, but the pain in my chest was gone because it had never been real. I didn't go into the clinic. I turned around and hailed the first taxi I saw. "Sterling Tower," I told the driver. "And hurry." The ride to the financial district felt like crossing into a different country. We left the potholed streets of my neighborhood and entered a canyon of steel and glass. Sterling Tower pierced the sky, a monolith of wealth and power that made me feel small and insignificant. I paid the driver with the crumpled bills I had stashed in my pocket years ago for emergencies and stood on the sidewalk looking up. My reflection in the revolving glass doors showed a tired old man in a stained cardigan and work pants, looking like a beggar at the gates of a palace. I walked to the security desk. The guard, a man with a jaw like a granite block, looked me up and down with open skepticism. "Can I help you, sir?" "Deliveries are in the back." "I am not a delivery," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I am Henry Sullivan. Preston Sterling is expecting me." The guard's eyebrows shot up. He clearly didn't believe me, but he picked up the phone. He spoke a few words, paused, and then his posture changed completely. He stood straighter, his face paling slightly. "Right away, sir. I apologize, Mr. Sullivan. Please take the private elevator on the left. Top floor." The elevator ride was smooth and silent, my ears popping as we ascended 70 stories in seconds. When the doors slid open, I wasn't in a hallway. I was in a reception area that was larger than my entire house. The carpet was thick enough to swallow my shoes. A woman in a sharp business suit stood up from behind a desk that looked like a piece of modern art. "Mr. Sullivan," she said softly. "He is waiting for you." She led me to a set of double mahogany doors and opened them. The office beyond was dimly lit, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. The air smelled of old paper medicine and expensive leather. At the far end of the room, behind a desk that seemed miles away, sat a man in a wheelchair. Preston Sterling was a shadow of the Titan I had seen in magazines. His frame was frail, swallowed by the blanket draped over his legs. A clear tube ran under his nose, connected to a small oxygen tank that hummed rhythmically. But his eyes, blue and piercing, were sharp. They locked onto me the moment I entered. "Henry," he wheezed, his voice sounding like dry leaves scraping together. "Come closer. Let me look at you." I walked across the room, feeling the heavy silence pressing against my ears. I stood before him, twisting my cap in my hands. I felt unworthy to be there, ashamed of my poverty, ashamed that I had let my son drive me to this desperation. "You look like her," Preston said, a tear leaking from the corner of his eye and tracking through the deep lines of his face, around the eyes. "You have Catherine's quiet strength." I choked back a sob at the mention of her name. "Why am I here, Mr. Sterling? My wife, she was just an administrative assistant." "Why did you call me Preston?" That let out a weak, rattling laugh that turned into a cough. He pressed a handkerchief to his mouth, composing himself, before looking back at me with an intensity that burned. "Just an assistant," he repeated, shaking his head. "That is what she wanted you to think. That is what she wanted everyone to think." Catherine hated the spotlight. She hated the fuss. "But Henry, your wife saved this company. She saved me." He gestured to a chair, and I sat mesmerizing by the reverence in his voice. It was 2008. Preston began, his gaze drifting to the window, to the past. The market was crashing. The world was burning down around us. Lehman Brothers had folded. Panic was the only currency left. I was losing everything. My advisors, men with Ivy League degrees and million-dollar bonuses, they were running around like headless chickens, telling me to sell, to liquidate, to cut our losses. They were terrified. I was terrified. He took a ragged breath, the oxygen machine hissing in the quiet room. One night, it was 2 a.m. I was sitting right here at this desk, ready to sign the papers that would have dissolved Sterling Holdings. I was going to lay off 4,000 people. I was going to surrender. And then Catherine walked in. She wasn't my assistant then. She was working in the archives, filing records in the basement. She came up here with a box of files and a pot of coffee. I tried to picture it. My Catherine, in her sensible shoes and cardigan, walking into a room full of panicked millionaires. She put the coffee down. Preston continued, a small smile touching his lips, and she looked at the papers I was about to sign. She didn't say a word. She just placed a single file folder on top of my bankruptcy draft. She had found a pattern, Henry. While everyone was looking at the crash, she had been looking at the data from the last 20 years. She had found a discrepancy in our hedging strategy that no one, not the auditors, not the CFO, no one had noticed. She had found a way to leverage our dormant assets to weather the storm. He looked at me, his eyes shining. She explained it to me in 5 minutes. Simple, clear, brilliant. She didn't have a finance degree. She just had an incredible mind for patterns and a gut instinct that was never wrong. I tore up the bankruptcy papers. We followed her plan. While everyone else drowned, we survived. We thrived. We made $50 million that quarter because of her. My mouth hung open. Catherine, my Catherine. The woman who clipped coupons for laundry detergent. The woman who worried if we spent too much on heating in the winter. I offered to promote her, Preston said. I offered to make her a vice president. I wanted to give her a corner office, a bonus that would have made headlines. Do you know what she said? I shook my head, unable to speak. She said no. She said she liked her quiet life. She said she didn't want to bring that kind of stress home to you. She said you were a proud man, Henry. She said you had worked hard all your life to provide, and she didn't want to make you feel small. She didn't want the money to change who you were as a family. Tears streamed down my face, now hot and fast. She had protected me. Even in her success, she had protected my pride. So we made a deal, Preston said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She stayed as my assistant. But she wasn't just answering phones, Henry. For the last 15 years, she was my most trusted advisor. Every major decision I made, I ran it by her first. And in exchange, instead of a salary increase that would raise questions, I set up a shadow portfolio for her. Stock options, performance bonuses, dividends. We reinvested it all. Compound interest is a powerful thing, Henry. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a heavy leather-bound portfolio. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward me. She wanted you to have this only after she was gone. She knew about Jason. She knew about his gambling, his recklessness. She knew if he found out while she was alive, he would bleed her dry. She was terrified of what he might become. It seems she was right. I stared at the leather folder. It looked heavy. It looked like a bomb waiting to go off. Open it, Henry Preston urged gently. I reached out my calloused fingers, brushing the smooth leather. I flipped it open. The first page was a summary statement from a trust fund named the Catherine Sullivan Trust. I scanned the lines, the list of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. My eyes traveled to the bottom of the page to the line marked Total Net Asset Value. I stopped breathing. The number was printed in bold black ink. It was a number that didn't belong in my world. It was a number that belonged to people like Preston Sterling, not Henry Sullivan. $18,422,000. I looked up at Preston, my vision blurring. This is a mistake. No mistake, Preston said. That is yours, Henry. It has always been yours. Catherine earned every penny. She saved this company, and in doing so, she built a fortress for you. But you have to be careful. He leaned forward, the intensity returning to his face. My private investigator has been watching your son. It is worse than you think. The men he owes money to, they are loan sharks from the Eastern Syndicate. They don't just want the money. They enjoy the pain. If they find out you have access to $18 million, they won't ask Jason to ask you nicely. They will kidnap you. They will torture you until you sign over every cent, and then they will kill you both to cover their tracks. I felt the blood drain from my face. The threat Jason had made about them killing him wasn't just drama. It was real. But now I was the target too. So what do? I whispered. I can't go back there. They have taken over my house. They are watching me. You have to go back, Preston said, his voice hard. You have to go back and play the part. You have to be the confused, frail old man they think you are. You need to let them believe they are winning. Because if they suspect you have power, they will strike. We need to trap them, Henry. We need to expose Jason's incompetence and greed legally, so that when we reveal the will, he is already disqualified from contesting it. He pressed a button on his desk. The side door opened and a woman walked in. She was tall, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob, and a suit that looked like armor. This is Ms. Weiss, Preston said. She is the best estate attorney in the city. She has drawn up a plan. It is dangerous, Henry. It will require you to walk back into the lion's den. But it is the only way to save yourself and honor Catherine's wish. Are you ready? I looked at the portfolio. I looked at the number that represented my wife's silent, decades-long labor of love. I thought of her coat stuffed into a trash bag. I thought of Jason installing locks on my doors. I closed the folder. I stood up, ignoring the pain in my hip. I am ready, I said. Tell me what I have to do. Ms. Weiss placed a sleek black briefcase on the desk and snapped the latches open with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet office. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She pulled out a document that looked like a military strategy map rather than a legal brief. This is Operation Trojan Horse, she said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. Henry, you are going back into that house, but you are not going back as a victim. You are going back as a spy. She reached into the briefcase and produced a simple, cheap-looking ballpoint pen. It looked exactly like the ones I bought in bulk for $1 at the discount store. She slid it across the desk to me. "This is not a pen," she explained. "It is a high-fidelity audio recorder. It has 50 hours of recording time and activates on voice command or with a subtle twist of the cap. You will keep this in your shirt pocket at all times." Next, she pulled out what looked like a spare button for a cardigan. It was small, brown, and unassuming. "This is a wide-angle lens," she said, holding it up to the light. "We are going to sew this onto your favorite sweater. It feeds a live stream directly to a secure server in my office. Whatever you see, we see. Whatever they do to you, we will have it on tape." I looked at the spy gear, feeling a surreal sense of dislocation. I was a retired mechanic. I fixed carburetors and changed oil. Now I was being outfitted like a Cold War agent to surveil my own son. "Why do we need all this?" I asked, fingering the plastic pen. "Can't I just kick them out? I own the house." "If you kick them out now," Ms. Weiss said, leaning forward, "Jason will claim you are mentally incompetent. He has already started laying the groundwork with the neighbors, hasn't he? Telling them you are confused, falling down." I nodded, remembering Jason's whisper after he pushed me. "Exactly. If you try to evict him, he will file for an emergency conservatorship. He will use your grief and your recent medical history against you. And with a corrupt doctor on his payroll, he might win. If he gets conservatorship, he gets control of your assets. He gets the house. And eventually, he might find the trust fund." She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "We need irrefutable proof, Henry. We need proof that he is abusive, that he is conspiring to defraud you, and that he is physically endangering you. We need him to incriminate himself on video. You need to let him think his plan is working. You need to be the frail, confused old man he wants you to be." Preston cleared his throat. "It is going to be hell, Henry. They are going to gaslight you. They are going to try to make you doubt your own sanity. They might even try to drug you again." I thought about the pill I had hidden under my tongue. I thought about the look in Brittany's eyes when she smashed Catherine's vase. "Let them try," I said, a cold resolve settling in my gut. "I have 18 million reasons to stay sane." Ms. Weiss handed me a small burner phone. "Keep this hidden. Do not use your regular phone for anything important. Jason is likely monitoring it. If you are in immediate physical danger, press the speed dial #1. We have a private security team stationed 2 blocks from your house 24/7. They can be through your front door in 90 seconds. I took the phone and the pen. I watched as Miss Weiss deftly sewed the camera button onto my cardigan, her movements precise and practiced. When she was done, I stood up. I looked at Preston, who was watching me with a mixture of pride and worry. "Thank you," I said, "for everything. For Catherine." "Don't thank me yet," Preston wheezed. "Survive the week. Then we will celebrate." I left Sterling Tower as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. I didn't take a taxi back. I took the bus just like the old Henry would have. I needed to get back into character. I needed to shrink myself, to hunch my shoulders, to let the grief and the age show on my face. When I unlocked the front door of my own house, the smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of vanilla and rain anymore. It was the smell of fast food grease and stale cigarette smoke. Jason didn't smoke, or at least he hadn't used to, but the ashtray on the coffee table was full. The living room was a disaster zone. Boxes were everywhere. My recliner had been pushed into a corner to make room for a massive flat-screen TV that Jason must have brought with him. Brittany was in the kitchen, loudly talking on the phone, a glass of wine in her hand. I walked in, dragging my feet, making sure I looked exhausted. Jason appeared from the hallway. He looked agitated, his eyes darting around the room. "Where were you?" he demanded, not out of concern, but out of suspicion. "You have been gone for hours." "I went to the clinic," I lied, my voice wavering. "The wait. It was so long. And then I walked to the park. I just needed to sit, to think about your mother." Jason scrutinized me, looking for any sign of rebellion, but all he saw was a tired old man in a cardigan. He relaxed, letting out a breath. "You shouldn't wander off, Dad. You know you get confused." We were worried. He didn't look worried. He looked relieved that his prisoner had returned to the cell. "I am sorry, son," I mumbled, shuffling toward the kitchen. "I am just so tired." Brittany hung up the phone and turned to me, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, Dad, you are back. Good. I made soup. You need to eat something." She gestured to a pot on the stove. It smelled savory, like chicken and herbs, but underneath it there was a faint chemical scent that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Sit down," she urged, pouring a bowl. "You look terrible. This will help you sleep." I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten breakfast with Catherine for 30 years. I looked at the soup. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, who were watching me with the intensity of predators waiting for the trap to spring. I reached into my pocket and twisted the cap of the pen. Then I reached for the spoon, my hand trembling just enough to sell the lie. The game had begun, and for the first time in my life, I was playing for keeps. The noise started at 6 in the morning, a grinding screech of metal prying against wood that vibrated through the floorboards of my bedroom. I sat up, my heart racing, the lingering taste of the fake soup still coating my tongue from the night before. I had barely slept, listening to the creaks and whispers of my house being held hostage. I grabbed my cane, not because I needed it to walk, but because it made me look frailer, and shuffled out into the hallway. The sight that greeted me in the living room made my blood boil. The antique Persian rug, the one Catherine and I had bought on our 20th anniversary trip to Turkey, was rolled up and shoved into a corner like garbage. Jason was on his knees, sweating through his t-shirt, a crowbar in his hand. He had ripped up 3 planks of the original oak flooring, exposing the dusty subfloor beneath. Brittany was standing over him with a flashlight, her eyes scanning the dark cavity with predatory intensity. "What are you doing?" I asked, letting my voice tremble. "That is the original floor." Catherine loved that floor. Jason jumped, dropping the crowbar with a clang. He spun around, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He looked like a man who had been chasing ghosts all night. "We are looking for termites, Dad," he lied, the falsehood coming out breathless and desperate. I heard scratching. "We have to be sure the structural integrity is sound before we do anything." "Termites," I repeated, staring at the perfectly healthy wood he had splintered. Brittany stepped in front of him, blocking my view of the destruction. "Oh, Henry, you are up early. Go back to bed. We are just handling some maintenance. You know how you get confused about house repairs. Remember last week when you thought the fridge was broken, but it was just unplugged? I had never thought the fridge was broken. They were rewriting history in real time." I looked at the hole in the floor. They weren't looking for termites. They were looking for cash. They thought Catherine, with her Depression-era mentality, must have hidden a rainy day fund somewhere in the house. If only they knew the fortune was sitting in a trust fund they couldn't touch with a crowbar. "I am hungry," I said, shifting the topic to see how they would react. "I want breakfast." Brittany sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of exhaustion. "Dad, we just ate breakfast. Don't you remember? You had oatmeal and toast." I stared at her. My stomach was growling. I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, because I had dumped her poisoned soup. "I didn't eat," I said firmly. "The kitchen is clean." "Because I cleaned it," Brittany said, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone one uses with a toddler. "You ate, then you went to the bathroom, and now you are back." This is what the doctor was talking about, Jason. The short-term memory loss is getting worse. She turned to Jason, nodding significantly. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and stood up. "Yeah, Dad. You ate. You are just forgetting. Go sit in your chair. I will turn on the TV." I walked to my recliner, confusion washing over me. For a split second, a terrifying second, I actually doubted myself. Had I eaten, I felt empty, but maybe that was the grief. Maybe my mind was slipping under the stress. I sat down and looked at the grandfather clock in the hall. It read 9 o'clock, but the sunlight coming through the window was pale and low, the kind of light you see at 7 in the morning. I checked my wrist, but my watch was gone. "Where is my watch?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "The gold Seiko Catherine gave me." "You lost it yesterday, Dad," Jason said from the floor, resuming his prying. "You took it off in the bathroom and knocked it into the trash." We looked everywhere. "It is gone." "No," I whispered. "I never take it off." I patted my shirt pocket, feeling for my reading glasses. They were gone too. I looked at the side table where I always left my blood pressure medication. The orange bottle was there, but it looked different. I reached for it, my hand shaking not from acting, but from genuine fear. I opened the bottle and tipped a pill into my palm. It was white and round, just like my lisinopril, but the texture was wrong. It was too smooth. I brought it to my nose. It smelled faintly of mint. I touched it to the tip of my tongue. Sugar. It was a breath mint. They had replaced my life-saving heart medication with candy. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was a siege. They were trying to kill me, or at the very least induce a medical emergency that would leave me incapacitated enough to hand over power. Brittany walked into the room, catching me staring at the pill. She didn't flinch. She walked over, took the pill from my hand, and popped it into my mouth, forcing my jaw shut with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Take your medicine, Henry. We don't want you having a stroke." I held the mint under my tongue until she turned away, then spat it into my handkerchief. The rest of the day was a blur of psychological torture. Every time I tried to do something, they corrected me. I went to the bathroom and Brittany told me I had just gone 5 minutes ago. I asked what day it was, and Jason told me it was Tuesday, when I knew for a fact it was Friday. They moved the furniture while I was napping, so when I woke up, I stumbled into the coffee table, bruising my shin. "See," Jason said, helping me up with feigned concern. "You are losing your balance. You can't navigate the house anymore. It is not safe for you here." By evening, I was exhausted, hungry, and trembling. The edges of reality felt frayed. I sat in my room, staring at the wall, tears leaking from my eyes. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I had imagined the meeting with Preston. Maybe there was no $18 million. Maybe I was just a sad, confused old man who was a burden to his family. My hand brushed against my chest pocket. I felt the hard plastic of the pen Ms. Weiss had given me. I pulled it out. It looked so ordinary. I twisted the cap, plugged the small earbud into the top, and pressed play. The audio was crisp and clear. I heard the sound of my own voice from the morning. I didn't eat. "The kitchen is clean." Then Brittany's voice, sharp and mocking. "Dad, we just ate breakfast. Don't you remember?" Then a few seconds of silence on the recording, followed by a sound I hadn't heard in the moment because I had walked away. It was Brittany giggling. "He bought it," she whispered on the tape. He actually looked at his stomach like he was confused. "God, this is too easy. If we keep this up for 2 more days, he will be begging to sign those papers just to make the confusion stop." Jason's voice chimed in low and cruel. "Just make sure you keep the clocks changed. He relies on that grandfather clock." "And did you swap the pills?" "Yeah," Brittany replied. "Tic-tacs. Let's see how his blood pressure likes that." I stopped the recording. I sat there in the dark, clutching the pen like a lifeline. The fog in my mind vanished instantly. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't frail. I was under attack. I did not have to wait long for the first test of my resolve, because the wolves were not just circling the perimeter, they were already inside the gates. That very night, just 3 hours after I had eaten my dinner and retreated to my room, pretending to be confused about which door led to the bathroom, I heard the rumble of an engine in the driveway. It wasn't Jason's rented SUV. It was something heavier with a deep, throaty idol that shook the window panes. I lay in bed with the lights off, my hand automatically going to the pen in my pocket. I heard the front door open, not with a key, but because Jason had unlocked it from the inside to let someone in. There were heavy footsteps on the hardwood floor, footsteps that didn't belong to my son or his wife. These were the heavy, confident strides of a man who owned the space he walked into, regardless of whose name was on the deed. I activated the recorder and lay perfectly still, controlling my breathing as the voices drifted up the stairs. "Nice place, Jason." The stranger's voice was deep and smooth like gravel mixed with honey, but there was an undercurrent of violence in it that made my skin crawl. "Vintage. Good bones. This neighborhood is trending up. You could get $850 for this if you stage it right." I heard the clink of glass bottles. Jason was offering him a drink. "Yeah, Tony, it is a great asset," Jason said, his voice pitching high with nerves. "That is why I told you I just need a little more time. The equity is there. I just need to extract it." I crept out of bed and moved to the door, cracking it open just a millimeter. The hallway was dark, but light spilled from the kitchen. I couldn't see them, but the sound carried perfectly in the silence of the house. "Time is a luxury you don't have," the man named Tony said. "The interest clock is ticking. Every day you don't pay me, the VIG goes up. And frankly, Jason, I am getting tired of your excuses. First it was the startup, then it was the inheritance. Now you are telling me you have to wait for probate. I don't do probate." No probate," Jason stammered. "I told you I am getting power of attorney. He is senile, Tony. His brain is mush. I will have legal control by the end of the week. I can list the house on Monday. Cash buyers only. A quick close." There was a long silence, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps moving from the kitchen to the living room. "Where is he?" Tony asked. "He is asleep upstairs," Jason replied quickly. "Don't worry, he is out of it. We gave him something to help him rest." "Show me," Tony commanded. "What?" Jason asked, his voice trembling. "Show me the collateral," Tony said. "I want to see the old man. I want to make sure he is as gone as you say he is, because if he wakes up and decides to fight you, this whole thing falls apart, and I will have to take my payment out of your hide." I scrambled back to bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. I let my mouth hang open slightly and relaxed my facial muscles, trying to mimic the slack expression of deep sleep. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't just my son anymore. A professional criminal was coming up my stairs. I heard them on the landing. The door to my room creaked open. The light from the hallway cut across the bed, blinding me even through my closed eyelids. "He looks frail," Tony noted, his voice dangerously close. "He smells like sickness." "He is 78, Jason whispered. "He thinks it is 1970. He doesn't even know who I am half the time." I felt the mattress dip as Tony sat down on the edge of the bed right next to my legs. I had to use every ounce of willpower not to recoil. I smelled expensive cologne mixed with the metallic tang of gun oil. "You know, Jason," Tony said conversationally, as if I were a piece of furniture. "Old men are fragile. Accidents happen all the time. Stairs are steep. Gas stoves leak. If he were to pass away in his sleep from natural causes, the house would be yours immediately, wouldn't it?" The suggestion hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Jason didn't answer immediately. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for him to tell this thug to get out of his father's house. I waited for some spark of decency to flare up in my son's soul. It would be faster," Jason admitted, his voice barely audible. "But I can't. I can't do that, Tony." "You don't have to do anything," Tony said, patting my leg through the blanket. "Nature takes its course. Stress is bad for the heart. And you are putting him under a lot of stress, aren't you?" Tony stood up the mattress, springing back. "I will give you 48 hours, Jason. If I don't see the paperwork transferring the title to you by Friday noon, I am going to come back. And I won't be just looking at the house. I will be liquidating my investment, starting with your kneecaps." And then I will come up here and finish what nature started with your dad, because unlike you, I don't leave loose ends. I lay there paralyzed as they left the room. The door didn't click shut completely, leaving me exposed to the sounds of their departure. Walk me out, Tony ordered. And Jason, nice wife. Ideally, she doesn't have to get involved in this mess either. Keep her focused. When the front door finally closed and the rumble of the engine faded into the distance, I opened my eyes in the dark. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity or my money anymore. I was fighting for my life. Jason wasn't just a disappointed son, he was a man being squeezed by a vice, and Tony had just given him permission to tighten the screw. That visit changed the dynamic of the house instantly. The next morning, the air was thick with a new kind of tension. Jason wasn't just irritable, he was vibrating with panic. He snapped at Brittany over coffee, his hands shaking so badly he spilled milk on the counter. We have to speed this up, he hissed at her, thinking I was out of earshot in the garden. Tony was here last night. He gave me a deadline. Brittany looked pale, the reality of their situation finally piercing her bubble of entitlement. What do we do? She whispered. The lawyer can't draw up the papers until we have the doctor's affidavit. Then get the doctor here today, Jason snapped. Pay him double if you have to. And Dad, we need to make sure Dad is compliant. If he puts up a fight in front of the doctor, if he seems lucid, it is over. I was crouching by the rose bushes pretending to prune the dead leaves, but I was listening to every word through the open kitchen window. This was the catalyst. Tony's threat had accelerated their timeline. They couldn't wait for me to naturally decline. They needed to force the issue. I decided to push them. If they were on the edge, I would give them a shove. I walked into the kitchen, wiping dirt from my hands. Good morning, I said, my voice surprisingly strong. They both jumped. Jason, I was thinking. I continued, ignoring their shock. I was thinking about what you said about the house. Maybe you are right. Jason's eyes lit up with hope. You mean it, Dad? You will sign? I walked to the fridge and opened it, staring inside. I will think about it, I said, deliberately being vague. But first I want to see a lawyer, not your lawyer, my lawyer. I want to make sure everything is fair. And I was thinking, maybe I should leave the money to the church. You two are young. You can work. The church needs a new roof. The color drained from Jason's face. It was the perfect trigger. By threatening to give away the asset he had already promised to Tony, I had backed him into a corner from which there was no escape. The church. Brittany screeched. Are you crazy? We are your family. I looked at her blankly. Family looks after family, I said simply. I am going to take a nap. Wake me up for lunch. I walked away, leaving them in a silence so profound it felt like a scream. I knew what would happen next. I had given them a terrifying ultimatum. If they let me act on my own, I would give the money away. Their only option now was to incapacitate me before I could make that call. I went to my room and checked the camera on my cardigan, ensuring the lens was clean. I checked the battery on the pen recorder. I sat in my chair and waited. I knew they were downstairs whispering, planning, rationalizing the unthinkable. And sure enough, an hour later, Brittany went to the store. She didn't buy groceries. She went to a pharmacy across town. When she came back, she went straight to the kitchen. I smelled the chicken soup simmering on the stove, the same soup she always made when I was sick. The comfort food that was now being weaponized. They were reacting exactly as Miss Weiss had predicted. They were escalating. And tonight, when they brought that bowl to my room, thinking they were finally taking control, they would be handing me the final nail for their coffins. The loan shark's visit had turned a family dispute into a life-or-death struggle, and I was ready to win. The morning sun sliced through the drawn curtains, hitting my face like a spotlight, but I didn't flinch. I kept my breathing shallow and rhythmic, maintaining the illusion of a man deep in a drug-induced stupor. I had spent the night in my recliner, wrapped in an old blanket, listening to Jason and Brittany whispering in the kitchen about listing prices and nursing homes. My body ached from staying in one position for so long, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins kept me sharp. I was a sniper waiting for the target to walk into the crosshairs. Around 9 o'clock, the front door opened. I heard heavy footsteps followed by the nervous, rapid-fire clicking of Jason's dress shoes on the hardwood. "He is in the living room," Jason said, his voice tight with urgency. "He hasn't moved since last night." I think the dose was effective. "Just make sure he is conscious enough to answer a few questions," a new voice replied. It was deep, gravelly, and sounded like it had been cured in smoke and whiskey. "We need him responsive for the evaluation, or the judge might get suspicious if I declare him incompetent while he is comatose." I cracked my eyes open just a sliver. Standing in my living room was a man Jason had introduced as Dr. K, a renowned neurologist. But he didn't look like any doctor I had ever seen. He wore a suit that was 2 sizes too big, the fabric shiny with wear at the elbows. His tie was stained, and he carried a battered leather satchel that looked more like it contained plumbing tools than medical instruments. He smelled of stale tobacco and nervous sweat. This wasn't a specialist. This was a hired gun, a man desperate enough to sell his license for quick cash. "Dad," Jason said, shaking my shoulder roughly. "Wake up. The doctor is here to see you." I let my head loll to the side, groaning softly. I blinked rapidly, feigning disorientation. "Who?" I mumbled, slurring my words. "Who is that? It is Dr. Kravitz," Dad Brittany said, stepping into my line of sight. She was wearing a new dress, probably bought with one of my credit cards. "He is a specialist. We called him because we are worried about your memory." The man stepped forward, pulling a penlight from his pocket. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask for my consent. He just pried my eyelid open and shone the light directly into my pupil. It was blinding, and I flinched, pulling away. Agitated Dr. K muttered, not to me, but to Jason. Classic sign. Disorientation. Aggression. He grabbed my wrist, pretending to check my pulse, but his thumb was pressing into the wrong spot. He wasn't counting beats. He was acting. "Mr. Sullivan, do you know what year it is?" he barked. I looked at him, letting my mouth hang open slightly. "It is 1970. I let the sentence trail off. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "And who is the president?" he asked, bored. I looked at Jason. Is it Eisenhower?" Jason let out a dramatic sigh, turning to the doctor with a look of practiced sorrow. "See, it is getting worse. Yesterday he didn't even recognize me. He thought I was the gardener. That was a lie. I had never mistaken him for anyone." But the doctor nodded gravely, pulling a clipboard from his bag. He scribbled furiously, documenting a condition that didn't exist. Advanced cognitive decline. Dr. K announced, his tone devoid of empathy. Likely Alzheimer's with paranoid delusions. He is a danger to himself. He cannot live alone. He cannot manage his own affairs. Brittany let out a small, excited gasp that she quickly tried to cover with a cough. "So what do we do?" "Doctor, I am recommending immediate conservatorship," Dr. K said, tapping the clipboard with his pen. "I will sign the affidavit stating that Mr. Sullivan lacks the capacity to make medical or financial decisions. This will give you his son full legal authority. You can sign the sale papers for the house, manage his accounts, and place him in a facility where he can get the help he needs." He said help the way a butcher says meat. I sat there watching them seal my fate. They were discussing stripping me of my rights, of my freedom, of my dignity, right in front of me, assuming I was too far gone to understand. The rage was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but I forced it down. I needed one more thing. I needed the transaction. I cleared my throat, a wet, rattling sound. I sat up a little straighter, looking from Jason to the doctor. I let my eyes clear just for a moment, dropping the mask of confusion. "Doctor," I said, my voice steadier than before. They all looked at me, surprised. "Yes, Mr. Sullivan," the doctor asked condescendingly. My son, I said, pointing a shaking finger at Jason. He is a good boy. He takes care of things. Jason puffed up his chest, smiling at the doctor. See, he has moments of clarity. I leaned forward, looking the fake doctor dead in the eye. How much, I asked. The doctor blinked. Excuse me. How much did he pay you? I asked, my voice taking on a childlike innocence. To sign the paper. Is it expensive? Everything is so expensive these days. Milk is $1. Gas is... I let my voice drift off again, returning to the rambling of a senile man. The doctor laughed, a harsh barking sound. He looked at Jason, a smirk twisting his lips. He thought I was just babbling. He thought I was a harmless, broken old thing. He leaned in close, his face inches from mine, his breath foul. $5,000, old man, he whispered loud enough for the microphone in my pocket to catch every syllable. $5,000 cash. And it is worth every penny to get you into a nice padded room where you won't bother anyone anymore. He straightened up and clapped Jason on the shoulder. Money well spent, kid. I will have the papers notarized and over to your lawyer by noon. You will be in charge of everything by the end of the day. I slumped back into the chair, closing my eyes. I felt the hard plastic of the pen against my chest. $5,000. That was the price of my life. That was the price of a father's freedom. Jason walked the doctor to the door, shaking his hand vigorously. Brittany was practically dancing in the kitchen. We did it, she whispered to herself, but I heard her. We actually did it. When Jason came back, he was beaming. The fear and desperation of the last few days were gone, replaced by the arrogance of a man who thinks he has gotten away with murder. Did you hear that, Dad? He asked, his voice cheerful. The doctor says we are going to get you help. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. I'm going to take care of the house, the bills, everything. He walked over and patted my cheek, a gesture so patronizing it took every ounce of my willpower not to bite his hand. You just rest now. Tomorrow is a big day. We are going to meet with the lawyer to finalize everything. And then we can find you a new home. A new home. A warehouse for the unwanted. I nodded, staring blankly at the wall. Okay, son, I whispered. Whatever you say. He turned and walked away, pulling his phone out to call his creditors. I got the money, I heard him say as he went upstairs. Yeah, the house is as good as sold. I will have your cash in 48 hours. Just call off the dogs. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade. Then I reached into my pocket and twisted the cap of the pen, stopping the recording. I had it. The diagnosis. The conspiracy. The bribe. The confession. It was done. The trap was set. All that was left was to spring it. And I knew exactly where that would happen. Tomorrow at the lawyer's office. But not just any lawyer. They were taking me to my lawyer. Or at least the man they thought was just a cheap attorney Jason had found online. They didn't know that Ms. Weiss had already replaced him with one of her associates. They didn't know when they were walking into a room wired for sound and video, a room where the hunter would finally become the prey. I closed my eyes, but this time I wasn't feigning sleep. I was resting, gathering my strength. Because tomorrow Henry Sullivan was going to die, and a new man, a man with $18 million and a heart of steel, was going to rise from his ashes. And God help anyone who stood in his way. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the cold cup of coffee Brittany had placed in front of me an hour ago. My hands were resting on my knees to stop them from trembling, not from age, but from the sheer force of the rage I was suppressing. Jason was pacing the length of the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a hushed, frantic whisper that grew louder with every step. I know, Tony. I know the deadline is noon. I am handling it. The papers are ready. We just need the signature. No, please do not come here. I swear I have it under control. He hung up and threw the phone onto the sofa. He ran both hands through his thinning hair, pulling at the roots. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to push him over. He turned to me, his eyes wild. "Dad, we are leaving. Now. I don't care if you are tired. I don't care if you don't feel well. We are going to the notary down the street, and you are going to sign the power of attorney and the deed transfer." He marched toward me, reaching for my arm. I shrank back, letting fear wash over my face. I needed him to believe I was broken. I needed him to believe he had won. "Jason," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I am so tired. I can't fight you anymore." "You win. You can have the house, you can have everything. Just promise you won't put me in one of those bad homes." Jason froze. Relief washed over his face, replacing the panic. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "I promise, Dad. We will find you a nice place. The best place. Just sign the papers." I nodded slowly, wiping a tear from my cheek. "I will sign, but not at a notary. I want to go to Mr. Black." "Who?" Jason asked, impatient. "Mr. Black," I repeated. "Your mother's lawyer. His office is downtown. He has all the old files. If we are going to do this, I want to do it right. I want him to handle it. He knows the property history." Jason hesitated. He looked at his watch. Downtown was 30 minutes away. "We don't have time for a trip downtown, Dad. Any notary can do this." "Please, son," I begged, clutching his sleeve. "It is the only thing I ask. I just want to feel safe." "Mr. Black. He is an old friend. If I sign it there, I will feel better. Please." Jason looked at Brittany. She was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, tapping her foot. "Just do it, Jason," she snapped. "If it makes him sign faster, just drive the car. We have 2 hours before your friend Tony loses his patience." "Fine," Jason spat. "Get your coat. But if you try anything, if you hesitate for 1 second, I swear I will drag you out of there myself." I nodded, keeping my head down to hide the glint in my eyes. Mr. Black wasn't my old lawyer. He was an associate of Ms. Weiss, and his office wasn't a dusty old practice. It was a stage set, a trap rigged with high-definition cameras and microphones waiting for the final act of this tragedy. The drive to the city was terrifying. Jason drove like a madman, weaving through traffic, running yellow lights, cursing at every car that slowed him down. Brittany sat in the back, checking the Zillow estimate of my house every 3 minutes, calculating her cut. I sat in the passenger seat, my hand over my heart, feeling the steady rhythm of the button camera sewn into my cardigan. We pulled up to a nondescript brick building on the edge of the financial district. A small brass plaque by the door read, "Black and Associates." It looked legitimate. It looked safe. Jason practically dragged me out of the car, his grip on my bicep bruising. "Move it, Dad," he hissed. "We are wasting time." We entered the office. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. A receptionist with glasses nodded at us and pointed to the conference room at the end of the hall. "Mr. Black is expecting you," she said. We walked in. The room was small, windowless, and intimate. A large mahogany table took up most of the space. Seated at the head of the table was a man in a gray suit, looking every bit the part of a bored, small-time attorney. He stood up as we entered. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, nodding to me. "Good to see you again." "Good to see you, Edward." I lied, shaking his hand. "This is my son, Jason." Jason didn't shake hands. He slammed a folder onto the table. "We are in a hurry," he announced. "My father wants to sign over power of attorney and transfer the deed of his property to me. He has been declared incompetent by a neurologist. Here is the affidavit." He slid the paper signed by the fake Dr. Kravitz across the table. Mr. Black picked it up, adjusting his glasses. He took his time reading it, which I knew was driving Jason insane. "I see," Mr. Black said slowly. "And you, Mr. Sullivan. Do you understand what you are signing?" I looked at Jason. He was staring at me, his eyes wide and threatening. He moved his hand slightly, mimicking a throat-slitting gesture. "Yes, I whispered, my voice trembling. I understand. I just want to rest. Good, Mr. Black said. He opened a file and produced 2 documents, the transfer of deed and the durable power of attorney. He placed them in front of me. Whenever you are ready, Henry. I picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. I wasn't faking the tremors entirely. The adrenaline was overwhelming. This was it, the moment of truth. Sign it, Brittany said from behind me. She was standing so close I could smell her perfume, cloying and heavy. She jammed her finger into the small of my back, a sharp, painful prod. Sign it now, old man. I lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered over the signature line. I took a deep breath. I can't breathe, I gasped. I dropped the pen. It clattered loudly on the wooden table. I brought both hands to my chest, gripping my cardigan, pulling at the fabric. I let out a strangled cry, my eyes rolling back in my head. Dad? Jason asked, but there was no concern in his voice, only annoyance. Stop stalling. Stop. Pick up the pen. My chest. I screamed, throwing myself sideways. I slid off the chair, crashing onto the carpeted floor. I curled into a ball, groaning, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I was playing the part of a man in the throes of a massive cardiac event. Call 911. Mr. Black shouted, standing up, but making no move to help exactly as planned. He needed to stay out of the frame to let the cameras capture the family dynamic. No, Asen! Roared. No 911. He is faking it. He is just trying to get out of it. Jason dropped to his knees beside me, but he didn't check my pulse. He didn't loosen my collar. He didn't ask me where it hurt. He grabbed my right hand. His fingers were cold and clammy. He yanked my arm, trying to pull me up, but I made my body dead weight. Get up, Jason screamed, spit flying from his mouth. You selfish old bastard, get up and sign the goddamn paper. I groaned louder, squeezing my eyes shut. I am dying. I don't care, Jason yelled. Sign it first, then you can die. He realized he couldn't get me back into the chair. He reached up to the table and grabbed the ink pad and the deed document. He slammed them onto the floor next to my head. If you can't sign, you will print, he hissed. He grabbed my thumb. He forced it onto the ink pad, pressing down hard, crushing my finger against the black sponge. Then he dragged my hand toward the paper. I resisted. I stiffened my arm, fighting him. Brittany, help me, Jason shouted. Hold his arm down! Brittany dropped to her knees on my other side, but she didn't grab my arm. She was reaching into my jacket pocket. She was reaching into my pants pocket. She was rifling through my clothes like a pickpocket. Forget the signature, she shrieked. Where are the keys? Where is the safe key? If he dies, we need the cash stash. She tore at my pockets, ripping the fabric. Jason was putting all his weight on my wrist, forcing my ink-stained thumb closer and closer to the line on the paper. Just one print, Jason grunted, sweating his face, a mask of pure, unadulterated greed. Just one print, and the house is mine. I looked up at him. I opened my eyes wide and looked directly into the face of my son. I saw no love there. I saw no humanity. I saw only a monster created by desperation and entitlement. And I knew in that second that any doubt I had left, any tiny flicker of paternal guilt, was gone forever. I went limp. I let my hand relax. Yes, Jason yelled triumphantly. He slammed my thumb onto the paper, smearing ink across the legal line. He held it there for a second, grinding my digit into the document to ensure a good impression. Got it, he screamed, lifting the paper up like a trophy. I got it. It is done. He scrambled to his feet, clutching the document to his chest, laughing a manic, high-pitched laugh. Brittany was still on the floor, cursing, as she pulled out my wallet and began tearing through the credit card slots. He doesn't have the key, she yelled. It is not here, who cares? Jason shouted. We have the house, we can tear the whole place apart brick by brick until we find it. He looked down at me. I was lying still, my eyes closed, my breathing shallow. Is he dead? Brittany asked, finally stopping her search. Jason nudged my leg with the toe of his shoe. A casual, disrespectful kick. Who cares? He said, echoing her words. He served his purpose. Let's go. They turned toward the door. They were leaving. They were actually going to leave their father dying on the floor of a law office so they could go liquidate his assets. But they didn't get far. The door to the conference room didn't open. It was locked. Jason jiggled the handle. He pulled harder. What the hell, he muttered. Open the door, he turned to Mr. Black, who was standing calmly by the window, his arms crossed. Hey, unlock this door, we are leaving. Mr. Black didn't move. He just pointed to the corner of the room to a small red light blinking on the ceiling. Then he pointed to another one above the door, and another one by the bookshelf. Jason followed his finger. He saw the cameras. He froze. The silence that fell over the room was heavy and suffocating. Then from the speaker system in the ceiling, a voice boomed out. It wasn't Mr. Black. It was Ms. Weiss. Please remain where you are. The police and the paramedics are on their way. And Jason, you might want to hold on to that paper. It will make excellent evidence at your trial for attempted murder and elder abuse. Jason dropped the paper. It floated to the floor, landing right next to my face. I opened my eyes. I sat up. I wiped the ink from my thumb onto my pants. I looked at my son, whose face had gone the color of ash. Surprise, I said, my voice strong and steady. And then the sirens began to wail. The paramedics burst into the conference room like a storm of blue uniforms and static noise, their boots thudding heavily against the carpet. I kept my eyes closed, my body limp, playing the part of the dying patriarch to perfection. I felt the cold sensors of the EKG machine being slapped onto my chest, and the hiss of an oxygen mask being placed over my face. Through the chaos, I heard Jason's voice shrill and frantic, but not with concern for my life. He was shouting at the EMTs, waving the document he had forced my thumb onto. He kept screaming that I had signed the papers just moments before the attack, trying to establish a timeline that would validate his theft. He was securing his alibi while I was being loaded onto a stretcher. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and potholes, but my mind was crystal clear. Miss Weiss had arranged everything. The ambulance crew knew the situation. They weren't taking me to the general emergency room, where I would be poked and prodded by strangers. They were taking me to a private suite that Preston Sterling had secured, a place where I could rise from the dead. But Jason and Brittany didn't know that. They followed the ambulance in their car, believing they were chasing a corpse. When we arrived at the hospital, I was wheeled through the double doors, and the performance continued until the medical team pushed me behind the swinging doors of the treatment area. Jason and Brittany were stopped at the nurses' station. I didn't need to be in the room with them to know what happened next, because Ms. Weiss had planted a listening device in Brittany's purse during the scuffle in the office, a sleek little tracker that doubled as a microphone. Later, I would listen to the recording of that hour in the waiting room, and it would chill me to the bone. They sat on the uncomfortable plastic chairs in the hallway, surrounded by families praying for their loved ones, surrounded by true grief. But my son and his wife were in a bubble of euphoric relief. They weren't praying. They were celebrating. Can you believe we pulled it off? Brittany whispered, her voice trembling with adrenaline. I thought he was going to die before we got the print. Jason let out a low, shaky laugh. It is ugly. The print is smeared and he dragged his thumb a bit, but it is there. It is identifiable. The notary will accept it. We just need to find one who doesn't ask too many questions about why the ink looks like it was applied during a wrestling match. Who cares? Brittany scoffed. Once the deed is recorded, it is done. We own the house. We can list it on the market by tomorrow morning. I already drafted the listing description on Zillow. 4-bedroom vintage charm, motivated sellers. Motivated sellers. That was an understatement. They were desperate sellers sitting on a gold mine they had stolen from a man they thought was taking his last breaths a few rooms away. Do you think he is going to make it? Brittany asked, but there was no hope in her tone, only calculation. Does it matter? Jason replied, and hearing those words from my own son felt like a physical blow. If he dies, we have the deed. If he survives, he is incapacitated. The doctor declared him incompetent this morning. Either way, he is out of the picture. He is either in a pine box or a nursing home bed by the end of the week. We won. They actually high-fived. In the middle of a hospital waiting room, while their father was supposedly fighting for his life, they high-fived. They began to plan the renovation budget for the sale. They argued about whether to paint the front door red or black to increase curb appeal. They spent the money from my home before the ink on my thumb was even dry. They were so drunk on their victory that they didn't notice the security guards slowly taking positions at the ends of the hallway. They didn't notice that no doctor came out to update them. They were alone in their victory, unaware that the walls were closing in. Jason stood up and paced the length of the hallway, the energy of the moment too much to contain. He needed to make the call. He needed to tell the wolves that he had the meat. I heard the beep of his phone as he dialed, and then his voice louder now, filled with the arrogant swagger of a man who thinks he has cheated fate. "Tony, it is me," Jason said into the phone. "Yeah, I told you. I told you I would handle it." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end, likely the loan shark who had threatened to remove his fingers one by one. "The asset is secured," Jason bragged, leaning against the hospital wall. "I have the signed deed in my hand. It is worth 800,000 easy. I can have your 500,000 by the end of the week. Yeah, with interest." He laughed, a sound that was half relief and half mania. "No more delays. We are listing it tomorrow. You will get your money, and Tony. When this is done, we are square. I am going to buy a Porsche with the leftover cash. I deserve it. I have been under a lot of stress." He was buying a luxury car with the equity of my life's work. He was planning his reward for abusing his father. The delusion was complete. He honestly believed he had earned this. He believed that terrorizing an old man, drugging him, and forcing a fingerprint onto a stolen document was a business transaction. He hung up the phone and walked back to Brittany, beaming. "It is done," he said. "Tony is off our backs. We are free, babe. We are rich." They hugged, clinging to each other like two survivors of a shipwreck, oblivious to the fact that they were the ones who had scuttled the boat. They sat there for another 20 minutes, dreaming out loud. They talked about vacations. They talked about buying new clothes. They talked about how nice it would be not to have me around, nagging them, taking up space, smelling like old age. Then the double doors swung open. But it wasn't a doctor with a grim face. It wasn't a chaplain coming to offer last rites. It was a nurse, a young woman with a crisp uniform and a face of stone. She walked straight up to them. "Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan?" she asked. Jason jumped up, composing his face into a mask of concern. "Yes, did he pass?" The nurse didn't answer the question. She didn't offer a tissue. She extended her hand and held out a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. "You are requested in the VIP suite on the top floor," she said, her voice professional and cold. Jason frowned, looking at the envelope. "VIP suite? What are you talking about?" "My dad doesn't have insurance for a VIP suite. He is on Medicare." The nurse pushed the envelope into his hand. "Everything has been taken care of. Mr. Sullivan is awake. His vital signs are stable. He is waiting for you. And he is not alone. This is an invitation from his legal team." "Legal team?" Brittany asked, her voice shrill. "He doesn't have a legal team. He has a guy named Edward in a strip mall office." The nurse turned on her heel. "Take the elevator to the 12th floor. Security will let you in." She walked away, leaving them standing there with the envelope. Jason tore it open. Inside was a heavy card with gold embossed lettering. It wasn't a medical update. It was a formal summons to the reading of the last will and testament of Catherine Sullivan. Jason stared at the card, then let out a scoffing laugh. "Mom's will," he said, shaking his head. "What is this, a joke? Mom didn't have anything. She had a collection of ceramic cats and a closet full of polyester coats. Why do we need a VIP room for that?" Brittany snatched the card from him. Maybe she had a life insurance policy we didn't know about, she said, her eyes narrowing. Maybe 10,020, it would cover the funeral costs at least. Jason sneered. Great. We get to go fight over who gets her old jewelry. Let's just get this over with so we can go sell the house. The old man is alive, which complicates things, but we have the paper. He can rot in the VIP suite for all I care. He crumpled the envelope and tossed it into a trash can. Come on, he said to Brittany. Let's go see what the old lady left. Maybe she hid a few dollars in a cookie jar. They walked toward the elevator, their steps light, their arrogance shielding them from the truth. They thought they were walking into a room to claim a few crumbs. They had no idea they were walking into an execution. They stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the 12th floor, rising toward the sky, rising toward the moment that would end their lives as they knew them. And I was waiting, sitting upright in a bed that cost more per night than their rent, flanked by a billionaire and a shark of a lawyer. I was waiting to introduce them to the mother they never bothered to know. The elevator doors slid open onto the 12th floor, revealing a hallway that looked more like a 5-star hotel than a hospital ward. The floors were carpeted in plush navy wool, and the air smelled of fresh lilies and expensive coffee. Jason and Brittany stepped out, looking around with a mixture of confusion and disdain. They were still expecting to find a dying man hooked up to machines, or perhaps a priest waiting to hand them a box of personal effects. They walked to the door marked Suite 1201, where a security guard in a dark suit nodded and opened the door for them without a word. They stepped inside and stopped dead in their tracks. The room was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. In the center of the room was not a hospital bed, but a seating area with leather armchairs and a mahogany coffee table. And there I was. I wasn't lying down. I wasn't gasping for air. I was sitting in a wingback chair wearing a silk robe that Preston had lent me, finishing a club sandwich and a glass of sparkling water. The color had returned to my cheeks, and the trembling in my hands was gone. Seated to my right was Preston Sterling, the billionaire recluse, looking frail but terrifyingly sharp in his wheelchair. To my left sat Miss Weiss, her laptop open, a stack of documents arranged precisely in front of her. Dad, Jason stammered, blinking as if the lighting were playing tricks on him. You are awake," the nurse said. "We thought you were in critical condition." I took a slow, deliberate sip of water. "I am feeling much better, Jason. It is amazing what good medical care and the removal of toxic stress can do for a man's constitution." Brittany looked from me to Preston, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, is that Preston Sterling? The billionaire. Why is he here?" "Mr. Sterling is a family friend," I said calmly. "He and your mother were very close." Jason let out a nervous laugh, tugging at his collar. "Mom knew a billionaire." "Come on, Dad. The drugs must still be in your system. Mom was a secretary." Miss Weiss cleared her throat. The sound was sharp and cut through Jason's nervous babble like a knife. "Please sit down, Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan. We have a lot to get through, and my time is billed at $800 an hour." They sat on the sofa opposite us, looking like two children called to the principal's office, confused, but still clinging to their arrogance. Jason kept glancing at the door, as if expecting the police to burst in, but when nothing happened, he relaxed slightly. He probably thought this was just some bizarre administrative formality before he could evict me. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Catherine Sullivan," Ms. Weiss announced, picking up the heavy document printed on cream paper. Jason rolled his eyes. "We know, lady. Can we skip to the end? Who gets the china set? Who gets the old Buick?" Weiss ignored him. She began to read. I, Catherine Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, hereby leave my entire estate, including all liquid assets, stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings. She paused for effect. To the Catherine Sullivan Trust. The current valuation of said trust as of this morning's market opening is $18,422,000. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Jason's mouth fell open, his jaw literally dropping. Brittany stopped breathing. Her eyes bulged, darting from the lawyer to me, to Preston. 18 million. Jason whispered, his voice cracking. You said 18 million. That is correct, Ms. Weiss said without looking up. Your mother was a very savvy investor, Mr. Sullivan, and a very private woman. The shock on their faces morphed instantly into something else. It was like watching a chemical reaction. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a raw, hungry greed that shone in their eyes like fever. Brittany let out a gasp that sounded like a sob. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, jumping up and rushing toward me. "Oh, Henry. Oh, Dad. I knew it. I knew. She was special. 18 million. She fell to her knees beside my chair, grabbing my hand. She tried to kiss my knuckles, her tears flowing freely now. Tears of pure avarice. "We are rich, Jason," she cried, looking back at her husband. "Do you hear that? We are rich." Jason stood up, his face flushed with adrenaline. He looked like a man who had just been pardoned from the electric chair. The debt, the loan sharks, the threats, it all vanished in a cloud of dollar signs. "Dad." He choked out, walking toward me with his arms open. "I can't believe it. Mom, she really looked out for us, didn't she?" He tried to hug me, but I held up a hand. He stopped, confused. "We are going to take such good care of you, Dad," Jason babbled, ignoring my coldness. "The best doctors. The best house. We can sell the old place and buy a mansion in the suburbs. We will all live together. You won't have to lift a finger. Brittany will cook for you every day." "Right, honey, yes." Brittany nodded frantically. "I will quit my job. Well, I will stay home full-time. We will be a real family again. Oh, Henry, I am so sorry about the misunderstanding earlier. We were just so stressed. But this changes everything." It was disgusting. It was a masterclass in hypocrisy. 5 minutes ago, they were celebrating my impending death in a hallway. Now they were planning our family vacation. They thought the money erased everything. They thought $18 million bought them a clean slate. Ms. Weiss cleared her throat again. "Sit down, Mr. Sullivan. I haven't finished reading the will." Jason sat down, grinning like a shark. "Go ahead. Read it. Does it say when the funds are released?" Miss Weiss adjusted her glasses and looked at them with a gaze that could freeze water. "The sole beneficiary of the trust is Henry Sullivan. He has full discretion over the funds. However, Catherine added a specific contingency clause regarding her son Jason and his wife Brittany." Jason's smile faltered slightly. "A clause? What kind of clause?" Ms. Weiss read from the document. "If at any time it is determined that my son Jason or his wife Brittany have acted in a manner that is abusive, neglectful, coercive, or physically harmful to my husband Henry." Jason went pale. "Or if they attempt to declare him incompetent, manipulate his medical care, or force him to sign legal documents under duress." Brittany let go of my hand and scrambled back to the sofa. "Then they are to be immediately and permanently disinherited. Not 1 cent of this trust shall go to them. Furthermore, if such behavior is documented, the entire trust shall be transferred to the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the National Alliance to End Elder Abuse, leaving Henry with a generous stipend and the children with absolutely nothing." The room went silent again. But this time it wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of terror. Jason swallowed hard. But you can't prove any of that." We love Dad. We have been taking care of him. The doctor, Dr. Kravitz said he was sick. We were just following medical advice. He looked at me pleading. Dad, tell them. Tell them we were just trying to help. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had squeezed my thumb onto an ink pad while I lay on the floor, pretending to die. I reached for the remote control on the arm of my chair. I pointed it at the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall opposite them. I don't have to tell them anything, Jason. I said, my voice steady and strong. I can show them. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. The video was crystal clear, shot from a high angle in high definition. It showed the conference room at Mr. Black's office. It showed me falling to the floor. It showed Jason screaming at me to die. It showed Brittany rifling through my pockets like a common thief. It showed Jason forcing my thumb onto the paper, his face twisted in a mask of pure evil. Just one print, the Jason on the screen screamed. Just one print, and the house is mine. In the hospital room, the real Jason watched himself, his face turning the color of ash. Brittany covered her mouth with her hand, a whimper escaping her throat. I pressed a button again, pausing the video on the frame where Jason was grinding my thumb into the paper. Then I pulled the digital recorder pen from my pocket. I placed it on the table and pressed play. The voice of the fake doctor filled the room loud and gravelly. $5,000, old man. And it is worth every penny to get you into a nice padded room where you won't bother anyone anymore. I turned off the recorder. I looked at Jason. He was trembling, his eyes wide with horror. He realized there was no way out. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was absolute. I am not senile, Jason, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. I never was. I heard every word you said. I saw every move you made. I know about the debt. I know about the Porsche you wanted to buy with my house. I know you fed me breath mints instead of heart medication. And I know you tried to drug me with that soup. Brittany started to sob, a high, keening sound of pure panic. It was his idea, she screamed, pointing at Jason. He made me do it. He owes money to the mob. He said they would kill us. Shut up, Jason yelled at her. Shut up! I stood up. I walked over to them, looking down at the people who had shared my home, my life. Catherine knew, I said softly. She knew exactly who you were. She wrote that clause because she knew that the moment she was gone, you would turn on me. And she was right. Dad, please, Jason begged, sliding off the sofa to his knees. Please, they are going to kill me. Tony, he will kill me if I don't pay. That is not my problem, I said. You made your choices. You chose money over your father. You chose greed over love. And now you have lost both. I turned to Ms. Weiss. Execute the clause, I said. They get nothing, not a penny, not the house, not the cars, nothing. Miss Weiss nodded, typing a command into her laptop. It is done, Mr. Sullivan. The trust is locked. Preston Sterling spoke up from his wheelchair, his voice raspy but final. And I have taken the liberty of contacting the district attorney. They are very interested in the video footage. Attempted fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy assault. It is quite a list, Jason. Jason looked at the door, realizing why the security guard had let them in so easily. It wasn't an invitation. It was a containment. He stood up, looking for a way out, but the door opened before he could move. 2 police officers stepped into the room, their faces grim. Behind them stood a detective I recognized from the precinct, the one Ms. Weiss had been coordinating with. Jason Sullivan. Brittany Sullivan, the detective asked. You are under arrest. Jason screamed, a sound of pure despair, as the officers grabbed him. Brittany collapsed, wailing. I watched them being handcuffed. I watched my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, being dragged away, kicking and crying for his father to save him. But I didn't move. I stood by the window, watching the city below, feeling the weight of $18 million and the crushing lightness of being completely, utterly alone. I had won. But as the door closed on my screaming son, I knew that the price of victory was a heartbreak that no amount of money could ever heal. The officers moved with the swift, practiced efficiency of men who had seen the worst of human nature and were no longer surprised by it. One of them, a burly sergeant with a face carved from granite, stepped forward and pulled Jason's arms behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the silent VIP suite, a sound that signaled the end of my son's life as a free man. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer intoned, his voice a monotone drone. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jason wasn't remaining silent. He was thrashing, his face contorted into a mask of sheer terror that went beyond the fear of incarceration. He was realizing that prison might be the safest place for him, but the road there was paved with the consequences of his debts. "Dad, stop them!" Jason screamed, spit flying from his lips as he struggled against the officer's grip. "You don't understand. Tony knows where I am. If I go to jail, I can't pay him. His guys are inside. They have contacts on the inside. They are going to kill me, Dad. They are going to cut me into pieces." I looked at him, really looked at him for the last time. I didn't see the little boy who used to catch fireflies in the backyard. I saw the man who had tried to drug his father into a coma for a quick payout. I saw the man who had crushed my thumb into an ink pad while I lay on the floor, pretending to die. "That is not my problem, Jason," I said, my voice devoid of the anger I had felt earlier, replaced now by a cold, hollow acceptance. "You dug this hole with your greed. Now you have to lie in it." Brittany was next. She wasn't fighting physically, but she was fighting with her words, spewing a stream of venomous accusations aimed squarely at her husband. "I didn't know about the soup," she shrieked as a female officer cuffed her. "He told me it was just a sleeping pill. He forced me to do it. I am a victim here. Henry, tell them I was always good to you." I looked at the woman who had rifled through my pockets looking for keys while I was supposedly having a heart attack. "You were good to me only when you thought I was your golden goose, Brittany," I said softly. "Take them away." As they were dragged toward the door, Jason made one last desperate attempt. He threw himself toward the floor, his knees hitting the carpet with a thud, dragging the officer down with him for a moment. "Dad, please," he sobbed, his voice breaking into a guttural wail. "I am your son. You can't let them kill your son, please. Just pay the debt. You have $18 million. It is nothing to you. Just pay Tony and I will disappear. I swear." I walked over to him. I leaned down, resting my hands on my knees so our eyes were level. "You are right, Jason. $18 million is a lot of money. It could pay your debt 30 times over. But I am not going to pay a single cent, because that money belongs to Catherine. And Catherine would rather see that money burn than use it to bail out the man who desecrated her memory and tried to destroy her husband." I stood up and turned my back on him. "Get them out of here," I commanded. The officers hauled him up. His screams echoed down the hallway long after the heavy door of the suite clicked shut, sealing the silence back into the room. I stood by the window for a long time, watching the flashing lights of the police cruisers far below as they whisked away the remnants of my biological family. I felt Preston's hand on my arm. "It is over, Henry," he said gently. "The storm is over." I nodded, feeling a tear track down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of regret. It was a tear of release. The storm was over and the wreckage was cleared. Now it was time to build something new. 12 months later, the autumn sun was shining brightly, but it wasn't the cold, gray light of a funeral. It was the golden, warm light of a new beginning. I stood on a raised platform in front of a gleaming new building made of brick and glass. I was wearing a charcoal suit that had been tailored to fit me perfectly, a stark contrast to the stained cardigan I had worn during the darkest week of my life. My back was straight, my hands steady. In front of me stood a crowd of 200 people. There were local politicians, journalists, and neighbors. But most importantly, there were 50 young men and women in blue coveralls, their faces bright with anticipation and hope. They were the first class of students for the new facility I had built on the site of an old abandoned warehouse. I stepped up to the microphone. The ribbon, a thick band of velvet in Catherine's favorite shade of blue, fluttered in the breeze in front of me. Preston Sterling sat in the front row looking frail but beaming with pride. Ms. Weiss stood next to him clapping politely. "Welcome," I said. My voice amplified across the courtyard. "Welcome to the grand opening of the Catherine Sullivan Technical Training Center." Applause washed over me, warm and genuine. I waited for it to subside. My wife Catherine was a woman who believed in hard work. She believed that talent was universal, but opportunity was not. She spent her life working in the shadows so that others could shine. She saved every penny not for herself, but for a future she wouldn't live to see. I looked at the students in the front row. Some of them had the same hungry, desperate look I had seen in my own mirror 50 years ago. Some of them came from broken homes, from poverty, from places where hope was a scarce commodity. When I lost my wife, I thought I had lost my family. I continued, my voice thickening with emotion. I thought I was alone. But I learned a hard lesson this year. Biology does not make a family. Love, respect, and shared values make a family. I picked up the heavy ceremonial scissors. I used the inheritance my wife left me to build this place. It is a tuition-free school for mechanics, electricians, plumbers, and tradespeople. We will give you the tools, the skills, and the start in life that you deserve. We will not give you a handout. We will give you a hand up. I looked up at the sky where a few white clouds drifted lazily across the blue expanse. "Catherine." I whispered through the microphone, caught it. "I couldn't save the son we raised. He chose his path. But I can help these children. I can use your gift to create a legacy of people who build, who fix, who work with honor." I turned back to the crowd. To the students I say this. You are my investment now. You are the children of this legacy. Make us proud. I squeezed the handles of the scissors. The blades sliced through the blue velvet with a crisp, satisfying sound. The ribbon fell away, and the crowd erupted into cheers. The students threw their caps into the air. The band started playing. As I walked down the steps to shake the hands of the young men and women who would carry Catherine's name into the future, I felt a lightness in my soul I hadn't felt in decades. I had lost a son to greed, but I had gained 100 sons and daughters through generosity. I stopped for a moment, looking back at the bronze plaque by the entrance. It read, "Catherine Sullivan. She saw value where others saw nothing." I touched the cold metal, feeling a warmth that radiated from within. "We did good, Katie," I murmured to the wind. "We did good." The screen fades to black as the sound of laughter and hopeful chatter fills the air, replacing the silence of a lonely house. Money can buy a house, but it cannot buy a home. And sometimes you have to prune the dead branches of your family tree so that new life can blossom in the sun. The hardest truth I faced wasn't losing my wife, but realizing my own children were strangers waiting for a payday. Catherine taught me that a true legacy isn't just what you leave behind in a bank account. It is the values you uphold and the lives you touch. I learned that you cannot buy love, and you certainly cannot buy loyalty. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is cut the branch that is poisoning the tree. Real family isn't defined by blood. It is defined by mutual respect, kindness, and the willingness to show up when there is absolutely nothing to gain. If Henry's journey inspired you to stand up for your own dignity, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with toxic family members? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching.